So I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we are meeting today. I'm joining you from the lands of the Gadigal people, and I recognise them as part of the oldest continuing culture in the world. We deeply respect strong and resilient First Nations women as knowledge holders of dreaming and songlines and as leaders in their families and communities. We strive to work alongside them as we commit ourselves towards improved opportunities and outcomes for all First Nations women and girls. I pay my respects to all elders past, present and future, to Aboriginal people joining us today, and acknowledge that this land always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Welcome everybody. This webinar is being recorded and it will be made available for people who couldn't join us at this time, and they can watch it when time allows for them. My name is Tanya Smythe. I'm the Director of Women New South Wales in the New South Wales Premier's Department. Thanks so much everyone for joining us. So we're here today because over half of Australian adults have experienced technology-based abuse at one point in their lifetime, and the likelihood of women experiencing this is much higher than men. With the internet being used in so many aspects of our daily life, it's important to understand what's at stake and how we can protect ourselves. Safer Internet Day is a global initiative that aims to raise awareness of online safety issues and work towards a better internet. Today, we're going to learn more about tech-based abuse, coercive control, online scams, and cybercrime, and how to protect our identities. During the webinar, we'll learn the warning signs of technology-facilitated abuse and the resources that are available to protect us, find out how easy it is for scammers to use or access our identities, and how to better keep them safe. We'll hear some case studies that show why it's important to protect ourselves and our loved ones online. We'll understand the importance of how to report online and why this will be protecting for us and our families, and how we can contribute to the broader safety online environment. We'll discover more about tech-based coercive control and what support is available. We'll also introduce you to the Women's Financial Toolkit and walk through some of the support that it has to help all of us. I do want to provide a trigger warning that before we proceed to talk about the topics of coercive control and identity theft, it might be difficult for some, especially those who are victim survivors of this abuse. If any of the topics raised today cause you any issues or concerns, please contact 1800-RESPECT, or you can call Lifeline on 13 11 14. At the end of our presentations today, we'll have time for a Q&A. So as we walk through those presentations, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. And when we get to the end, we'll be able to walk through those and have our presenters answer some of those questions for us. So speaking of our presenters today, we're very fortunate to have an incredible lineup of speakers. And first off, I'd like to welcome Carolyn Wilkes. Carolyn is a manager of Gender and Technology team in the eSafety's Education, Prevention and Inclusion branch. And this team works to encourage better responses to and the prevention of tech-based abuse of women and the building of safe, inclusive and gender equal online spaces. In the 10 years prior to joining eSafety, Carolyn worked with the Federal Department of Social Services on a range of disability programs and policies, including early intervention, NDIS safeguards and disability advocacy. She has also held other roles in local government community development and in the non-government sector. So I'll hand over to Carolyn now, who'll help us understand better the role of eSafety, what is technology facilitated abuse, and how we can protect ourselves. Thanks, Carolyn.
Thank you. Okay, can we go to the next slide, please? Yes. Okay, so thank you. I'm joining you from Ngunnawal and Ngambri country. I acknowledge the care of this country by traditional custodians for many thousands of years, and I pay my respects to the elders of the past, whose legacy continues, the elders of the present who are leading the way, and the elders of the future. May we help them with the tasks ahead. Next slide, please. So for those of you unfamiliar with our work, eSafety Commission is Australia's independent regulator, educator and national coordinator for online safety. We began in 2015 as the Children's eSafety Commissioner, but have expanded our remit and are now at the forefront of the fight against online risks and harms faced by adults as well as children. And today we're a fast-growing team of educators, investigators, lawyers, policy analysts, technology experts, digital specialists, and other professionals who share one goal, and that's the safer and more positive online experiences for all Australians. Next slide, please. As a regulator, our approach is to focus on the 3 pillars of prevention, protection, and proactive and systemic change. And that first pillar, prevention, is where eSafety conducts research, provides evidence-based online safety resources and programs which empower individuals, families, and communities to be safer online. And that's largely where the work of my team and my branch sits. The second pillar, protection, is the regulatory and co-regulatory elements of the Online Safety Act. And this includes our investigations teams, providing Australians who have experienced online harms with rapid, effective support through our complaint schemes, including for serious adult cyber abuse and image-based abuse. And I'll return to those later. And the final pillar, proactive and systemic change, is where we lift standards for online safety and ensure industry minimises online harms by identifying emerging risks, undertaking research and collaborating to promote a safety by design approach. We also acknowledge that our work is effective mainly because of our partnerships with stakeholders across diverse communities and sectors. And on to the next one. And as we all know, today is Safer Internet Day, our global initiative to raise awareness of online safety, and the eSafety Commissioner leads the initiative in Australia. And Safer Internet Day is a great opportunity for workplaces, community organisations, schools, industry, government and families to engage in important conversations about online safety and focus on creating safer online spaces. And our goal is for everyone to be informed about online safety, to understand how to report online abuse and actively contribute to a safer online environment so that every day becomes a safer internet day. And as you can see on my slide behind, if you can see my picture, we focus on 3 simple actions when approaching online safety: to connect safely by keeping apps and devices secure and reviewing privacy settings regularly, to reflect on how your actions online may affect others or your safety and how to manage common online safety issues, and protect yourself and others by visiting esafety.gov.au to find out how to stay safe online and report online abuse. I'll be looking at that in slightly different focus today. My focus is on tech-facilitated abuse. I'll look at the drivers, including coercive control, and some of the available responses that we can deal with. So, next slide. Let's begin with, what is tech-facilitated abuse? So it's any form of abuse that's enabled through digital technologies, including online. The term technology-facilitated abuse, sometimes we refer to it as tech-facilitated gender-based violence or tech-based abuse. It's wide-ranging and inclusive of many types of interpersonal violence and abuse using a range of digital technologies. This can include stalking and monitoring behaviours, psychological and emotional abuse, including threats, sexual violence and harassment, and image-based abuse. The term can also refer more broadly to forms of general online harassment and cyber abuse. However, Australian policy and emerging research has generally focused on gendered violence, in particular the ways that technologies are used as a tool to enact family and domestic violence. Next slide, please. Research by both eSafety and ANROSE, or Australia's National Research Organisation for Women's Safety, indicate that women, men and gender diverse people experience different forms of tech-facilitated abuse and different impacts. As we can see from this slide, men experience sexual extortion at far greater rates than women. And sexual extortion is a form of blackmail where a fake profile is used to coerce usually young men and teens to provide a sexually explicit image or video, then threaten to share it with family, friends or co-workers if they're not paid immediately. But as you can also see clearly from this slide, women experience most other forms of tech-facilitated abuse at far greater rates. Women experience online abuse that is often personal, sexualised, often violent and threatening, and which can cause real enduring harm. And tech-facilitated gender-based violence is an emerging but rapidly accelerating form of gender-based violence that's increasingly impacting women across the course of their life and across the areas where they study, work and live. Next one, please. And what we absolutely know from the research is that women who identify as LGBTQI+, or who have a disability, or are from diverse ethnic or religious communities are 3 times more likely to experience online hate. When online abuse is targeted at multiple intersecting aspects of a person's identity, it becomes intersectional abuse. And as the online abuse is experienced intersectionally, it compounds the intensity and the impact of that experience. And women with intersecting identities are the target of some of the most violent, vicious gender disinformation and online hate campaigns. Next slide, please. Raghavan's comment here that social media just doesn't simply mirror the structures of the offline world. There is a degree of aggression and toxicity that you don't see in real world encounters is disturbing but true. The types of attacks we see taking place in the online environment express a level of violence we thankfully mostly do not see in real life encounters. But unfortunately, that doesn't minimise the great harms that can be brought upon the person experiencing these online attacks. So we'll look a little closer at the psychological violence, the sexual harassment and violence, and the gender disinformation. Next slide, please. The research indicates that many women online, especially those in high-profile positions, experience targeted attacks such as relentless trolling, hate mail, bullying and intimidation, as well as sustained harassment, which can include threats on loved ones. And these attacks can be considered part of the norms of online and public engagement, and expectations around enduring such behaviour can leave women feeling they have no recourse. This assumption can be incredibly toxic to women and can lead to low mental well-being, physical health impacts such as insomnia, a sense of isolation, and a sometimes subconscious decision to self-censor. Next slide, please. Women are also experiencing sexual harassment and violence from both the public and from within the workplace. And these attacks range from sexist remarks designed to belittle or sexually explicit comments designed to humiliate and distress. Rape threats are often deployed as a particular horror, sometimes aimed at women's children to maximise their impact. Image-based abuse, in which a woman's face may be artificially integrated into a photo or video so as to appear to be engaging in sexual activity, or someone tagging a nude with a woman's name, even though it's not them, can be devastating. And with the exponential growth of generative AI capabilities, that threat surface continues to expand. Next slide, please. And online efforts to drive women out of public life can be coordinated and much more insidious. It's sometimes referred to as gender disinformation, and it's a more subtle and diffuse form of online abuse that's designed to undermine a woman's self-confidence, question her competence, and manifest as a coordinated online whisper campaign, which is ultimately designed to discredit and cause her to self-censor and leave public life altogether. Gender disinformation is a new threat and is taking a significant toll on women's willingness to maintain an online presence, which is often a criteria of the work that they do. A woman's reputation may be attacked through false accusations or statements or other forms of smear campaigns in an attempt to discredit them. And these false narratives around women are designed to further entrench those sexist stereotypes and misogynistic attitudes. They assert that masculine characteristics are needed for leadership, that women are unqualified, unintelligent, unlikable, and unelectable. And false histories discrediting a woman's professional background are also being deployed against women with a public profile. Disinformation often misrepresents or reframes true information as evidence of a particular agenda. Research indicates that some of these hate campaigns and relentless trolling are organised, coordinated attacks, not just individual actions. And unfortunately, people are more likely to believe content that they've seen repeatedly. And one of the significant threats of this gender disinformation is it's providing new strength to latent misogyny in society and normalising it at scale. Next slide, please. So what are the drivers behind these abusive behaviours? As I've suggested in some of the things I've said earlier, we're looking at social norms. The National Plan to End Violence Against Women and the work done by Our Watch clearly articulates that we need to shift community attitudes and social norms that justify, excuse, trivialise, normalise or downplay violence against women and children. This includes challenging attitudes and social norms that normalise male control and dominance, that privilege masculine behaviours and character traits, and promote male control over decision-making in public life and in relationships. And the latest National Community Attitudes Survey findings about tech-facilitated abuse that I've provided there show that we have some work to do. The next slide, please. It's these attitudes and norms that contribute to coercive control, which is the ongoing pattern of behaviour used to control another person through manipulation, pressure and fear. And tech-based coercive control is almost always a factor in family and domestic violence. It can also be part of sexual violence. It can be difficult to recognise and escape because technology is so common and affects almost every part of our lives. Tech-based coercive control can be used to undermine your self-worth, confidence and independence. It can cut you off from social supports such as friends, family, services and money. It can pressure or threaten you to make you do things or stop doing things. Some of the examples we've seen at eSafety is, threatening to share nudes after claims have been made for child support, or examples of financial abuse where an abusive former partner might send multiple abusive messages through microtransactions online. Next slide, please. So what can we do about all the things that I've talked about so far? It turns out there's quite a lot that can be done. So our reporting schemes, next slide. Yeah. So our reporting schemes are available and they're put into action by our investigations branch. We have eSafety has more than 40 skilled investigators, including former law enforcement and intelligence officers, lawyers and professionals from online occupations. They work on complaints across our 4 schemes. There's cyberbullying of children, they're under 18s. We have a legal and restricted content scheme, which is primarily about child sex abuse material, but also includes content relating to terrorist or other violent acts. These 2 latter ones are the ones you're more likely to come into contact with or need. And it's image-based abuse scheme, which is about the non-consensual sharing or threatening to share intimate images or videos. And the adult cyber abuse, which is about severely abusive online communication to or and about an adult that is seriously threatening. We have a great deal of useful information on our website to explain these schemes in detail, what they cover and how to report, including reporting on behalf of someone else. Across all our reporting schemes, our key goal is to alleviate harm to Australian citizens. And our investigators have very good success rate at getting content removed, either informally or formally. I encourage people to go online and have a look at the information there and become familiar with what can be done. Next slide, please. Of course, there's unfortunately a large range of online harms that can be perpetrated that are outside the powers of eSafety to help. In the case of financial abuse, please contact the financial institution or bank because they may be able to stop transactions, get money back, or assist people to change contact or authorising details. You can also report to ScamWatch at scamwatch.gov.au for reporting scams, including romance scams. If your personal information has been compromised or misused, including the loss of a passport, you can contact idcare.org. For all Medicare, Centrelink and MyGov scams, please call Services Australia. There's 1800 941 126, or you can email them at reporterscam@scamwatch at Services Australia. And for other crimes relating to children online, the Australian Centre to Counter Child Exploitation is available for sexual extortion for under 18s and other issues. Next slide, please. And as I outlined at the start, eSafety puts a lot of effort into our prevention space and the prevention of online harms. We have a wide range of online resources. We have web-based advice and resources for diverse communities, for parents, young people, and educators. We have an eSafety guide that's continually updated and contains information on the ever-increasing number of apps, games, and platforms, and how you can manage their settings for your safety. We also have the Safety by Design resources, which I touched on very briefly at the start, around for industry, and that's trying to encourage industry, the tech industry, and others to build in safety at the start of their design processes and setting up of systems, rather than adding it on at the end. We provide a range of webinars and training. We have tech-facilitated abuse in domestic, family and sexual violence training for frontline workers, including police. There's also a range of training offerings for educators. We have, for the members of the public, tech-facilitated abuse webinars and social media self-defense sessions. Excuse me. And when it comes to changing attitudes and behaviours, where some of the examples of the work that we're doing there, we've just recently started a program called Preventing Tech-Based Abuse of Women, the grants program. That follows on from a very successful online safety grants program, but we're funding grants for primary prevention projects aimed at changing those attitudes, those social norms and behaviours that lead to violence against women, and with a focus on technology. And we've also commissioned research recently on the online experiences and motivations of boys and young men that will help us help inform future resources and programs, so we can get in earlier and change behaviours and attitudes. We also work strongly with sports organisations to improve online safety for participants at all levels. That's just a bit of a snapshot there. I would encourage you to stay up to date and keep your knowledge current by signing up to our newsletters, which you can find on our website. Refer back to what we said originally. Some of this information can be quite tough. There are some of the organisations that we refer people to and encourage people to reach out to. But thank you. Thank you for the time and being able to talk through some of these things. And I'll hand back to.
Thank you, Carolyn. Those contacts for reporting cybercrime and abuse are extremely useful. And just in response to a question in the chat, we will share the presentations after, so you'll have all of those resources. It's also great to learn about all of the effort going into the prevention of tech-facilitated abuse. So well done to you and your organisation. Thank you.
No worries.
Our next speaker is Alicia Anderson. Alicia is an advisor with the stakeholder engagement team at ID Support New South Wales. With a background in the banking sector, Alicia has seen impacts of identity theft firsthand. She now travels across New South Wales hosting education sessions and is passionate about teaching the community on how to keep their information safe. Alicia is going to talk to us about the value of personal information, steps to reduce our cyber risk, and how to seek help and report scams. Thank you, Alicia. Over to you.
Thanks very much, Tanya. And hard act to follow after Carolyn's presentation. Some great work there by eSafety Commissioner. But so I would like to begin this session today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the various lands on which we all meet today, and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this online event. I also pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters of New South Wales. So for those who don't know who we are or haven't heard of ID Support before, we are a business unit within the New South Wales Government, and we were established to address the issues of identity misuse for customers, businesses, and also the government. So essentially, we aim to prevent, respond, and recover. So now we all know how important this topic of conversation is, yet most of us don't know the foundations of protecting ourselves. Next slide, please. So as Tanya mentioned, just a quick overview, I will discuss the value of our personal information, why scammers want this information, and also how they get their hands on it. I will also share with you a case study from one of our customers and take you through some proactive steps to reduce your cybersecurity risk. And most importantly, inform you on where you can go to get help and support. So, what is identity theft? It is when someone gathers information about you and uses it to impersonate or defraud you. And we're hearing about it all the time, and we're seeing more people affected by it. And unfortunately, some of us here today could potentially be a victim and not be aware of it. Next slide, please. Now, we all have had to many of times provide our personal information to different organisations or services. So this is when we use a service, buy a product, or even when we shop online. Our data is recorded and it's frequently retained. And we're handing over more of our data than ever before. And often to companies that are partnered with hundreds or even thousands of third parties. So this makes it really impossible to know who has access to this information. Now, your personal information is any information that relates to a specific person, and it's used to identify you as an individual and can include many things like full name, address, your medical information, your driver license details, even your tax file number. It includes a broad range of information, and it's extremely valuable as all this information forms your identity. And as our lives have moved to become more and more digital, so has the way we've proofed our identities, giving assurances for who we are and our reliability and credibility. We can transact online with our credit cards and also our ID documents without ever showing our faces. Now, the document verification service does allow you to check government issued ID against the system of record to actually make sure that it's valid. So while it can tell you that, yes, this is a valid New South Wales driver license, unfortunately, what it can't tell you is that the person who's entering those details online is who they say they are. Next slide. So now, why do these criminals and cyber criminals want this information? And what is it that they can do with it? So fraudsters know that with someone's identity documents, they can basically impersonate them online. Also, they can make a profit by selling the stolen data to other criminals on the dark web. Now, the dark web is home to online marketplaces that allow criminals to buy and sell these stolen identities as they please. Next slide. And last year, the average price of a New South Wales driver licence was only about $60. And an Australian credit card with a 3-digit code was only $30. So they're really affordable and they're in high demand. So if you think about how much a criminal could actually make with a data breach that has exposed 100 licenses, 1,000, possibly a million licenses, it's quite a lot of money. Next slide, please. And here there are some shots of the dark web and some examples of tax file numbers and driver's licenses for sale. Buyers can purchase the data that they're interested in, and then they can use that stolen data in several different ways. So credit card numbers and security codes can be used to create clone cards for making those fraudulent transactions. Also, full names, addresses, date of birth, any personal identifiable information can be used in identity theft. They can apply for loans or credit cards under the victim's names and even file fraudulent tax returns. Next slide, please. So how do these criminals get our personal information? Well, it can happen in many ways. So let's go through some of the common ones. First, we have data breaches. So a data breach occurs when a cyber criminal successfully infiltrates a data source and takes that sensitive information. And this can be done either physically by accessing a computer or network to steal files, or by bypassing network security remotely. And data breaches are happening all the time. And everyone knows that Australia has had a really bad run lately. And if it felt like we were getting smashed by data breaches in the last 2 years, it's because we were. Australia had the highest data breach density in the world in the last quarter of 2022, which is a staggering 24 times more the global average. Next, we have scams, and fraudsters create these sophisticated scams to obtain our personal information, and they come in all shapes and forms. There's phishing emails, there's text message and phone scams, remote access scams, dating and romance scams, and these are just naming a few of them. Scammers will impersonate businesses. They will impersonate businesses, government agencies, and even law enforcement to try and get us to share or even confirm information with them. And if you provide the scammer with your details, they will then use this to carry out fraudulent activities, such as using your credit cards and stealing your money. And third, we have poor online security. So if we don't take our online security seriously, then hackers can exploit these security weaknesses. And weaknesses can include reused and easily guessed passwords, not using multi-factor authentication on your online accounts, possibly out-of-date antivirus software, and unsecured Wi-Fi and Bluetooth connections. Next slide. There's also another one called credential stuffing. So this is a tactic employed by cybercriminals where stolen login details are actually entered into multiple online services and web applications using an automated tool to gain that unauthorized access into a user's online profile or account. And cybercriminals assume that many of us will reuse already compromised passwords across multiple sites and services, thereby ensuring a high chance of success of accessing users' account and online profiles. So, where payment details have been stored, cybercriminals can make fraudulent purchases and rack up hundreds or even thousands of dollars worth of transactions. There's also oversharing our information. So, in this digital age, it's really easy to become complacent when we're sharing our personal information online. It's a force of habit we've developed given the widespread use of smart devices and online services. But consider the implications for our identity if this information were to be fraudulently accessed or obtained. Now, the overwhelming reality surfaces when we start contemplating the extent of our personal data scattered across the web. And as a society, we put a huge amount of trust in service providers, expecting them to secure our information safely. But the harsh reality is that there is no guarantee that these providers will safeguard our information securely. The custodians of our data are not immune to cyber incidents, putting our information and our identity at significant risk, potentially, as I mentioned before, being sold on the dark web. Now, there's also hacking. We've all heard of this before, and this occurs when a scammer gains access to your personal information by using technology to break into your computer, mobile device, or network. Next slide, please. Now, to give you an example of how oversharing our information and poor online security can be risky, let's quickly dive into Sarah's story. So, Sarah is a 25-year-old marketing professional and an active user of multiple social media platforms. Not only are her accounts set to public, but her online presence is underpinned by a raft of personal information. So, this includes frequently tagging her location in Instagram stories, daily activities, and intimate details of her personal relationships. And unbeknown to Sarah, her oversharing habits make her an attractive target for cybercriminals seeking to exploit her vulnerability. Sarah's daily routine involves posting those status updates, check-ins and photos showcasing her life to a wide audience. Her posts include details about her work, her social outings, and even her romantic relationships. And Sarah believes that sharing every aspect of her life fosters those connections and allows her to maintain an open and authentic online presence. Cybercriminals monitor Sarah's online activities and meticulously collect this information about her habits, her preferences, and personal relationships. And with every post, Sarah unwillingly contributes to a wealth of data that can actually be exploited for malicious purposes. So, armed with the information gathered from Sarah's overshared details, cybercriminals craft targeted phishing attacks. They send convincing emails, seemingly from those reputable sources, tailored to Sarah's interests and her preferences. And these emails may include personal content related to her recent activities online. Now, Sarah falls victim to one of these sophisticated attacks. Unaware of the malicious intent behind an email, she clicks on what seems to be a harmless link, leading to the compromise of her login credentials and sensitive personal information. And as Sarah did not have multi-factor authentication enabled and no second line of defense, the cybercriminals were able to use this information to access her financial accounts without her knowledge, leading to unauthorized transactions and identity theft. So as Sarah discovers the extent of the breach, she goes through a profound invasion of her privacy. The realization that her personal information has now been exploited for criminal activities makes her feel vulnerable, makes her feel anxious and betrayed. Sarah now has to deal with those emotional consequences and the aftermath of the incident, questioning her online habits and the unintended consequences of oversharing her information. Next slide, thank you. So now we know the value of our personal information and why criminals want it. Let's go through some tips on how we protect ourselves from having our information stolen. So be cautious. Don't be afraid to ask why an organisation might be collecting your information. How do they secure it? How long are they keeping it? Do they share it? If so, with who? Always read the fine print. Now, if you are online using social media platforms, be aware of the overshare. Make sure you read the policies and pick a privacy setting that suits you. Now, when you get asked for your information online, over the phone or in person, don't just hand it over. Take the time to verify the request is legitimate first. You can do this by calling the organisation through a known contact number or even via their website. Be cyber safe when online. Run antivirus software, do regular software updates, and avoid using unsecured wireless networks such as the free Wi-Fi at your local shopping centre or Macca's. Use multi-factor authentication wherever possible. This is your second layer of protection on your online accounts. Also use strong complex passphrases across all your accounts. Update them regularly and keep them private. Secure your personal documents. Make sure you have a locked letterbox. And when you dispose of mail that has your personal information on it, you might want to consider shredding it. Ensure that you're not leaving laptops unlocked, desktop computers, or even your mobile phone. The information that's kept on your devices can be used to steal your identity. A big one a lot of us don't do anymore is actually checking your bank statements and looking out for any unusual activity or something you don't recognise, as this may be an indication of fraud. Lastly, run a credit history report. This will give you a look at any credit or loan requests and you can see if there's been any suspicious activity that you are unaware of. Now, if you have fallen victim to identity theft, scam, or cybercrime, it's important that you report it for many reasons. Firstly, it can reduce the amount of scam emails you may receive, which makes you a harder target for scammers. But it's really crucial that you get in touch with the agencies listed here and report any type of scam or fraudulent activity or even a potential scam that you might not be sure of. This information allows the agencies to identify any new or current trends and scams that are going around, and they can then warn businesses and consumers. It can also help to protect others, as reports then get shared with law enforcement and the banks and other companies who can then take steps to stop these scams. Now, the criminals behind these scams are becoming really sophisticated in their attempts, and it's really hard to spot these threats. So, identifying them and reporting them can help by protecting others from the same threat. So, we understand that some people are embarrassed or ashamed when they realize they have fallen victim. We understand that, and they may also, blame themselves for being gullible, vulnerable, and they don't want to let anyone know about the incident and try and sweep it under the rug. But we're here to tell you that you're not alone and that there are agencies out there that can help. You can report scams to Scamwatch, cybercrimes to Report Cyber. eSafety, as you've learned about today, will teach you how to stay safe online, and the New South Wales Police will help you if a crime has actually been committed. But ID Support New South Wales will help you navigate all of these places. We do understand that every case is different, and our advisors will provide tailored advice to each individual. So give our team a call and they'll guide you through on all the steps you need to take to keep yourself safe and remediate the situation. We are a one-stop shop. Now, if you did want any access to further information, there's heaps of resources online. There's some learning modules on things like shopping, data breaches, cryptocurrency, and scams. So they're all self-paced. You can also register for events. So like things you've seen today, you can register for an event that will dive deeper into some of the topics we touched on. We also have a newsletter that you can sign up for, and the website is also home to our password strength tester. So this is where you can pop in your password and the strength tester will actually tell you how hard it is to guess, give you tips on how to make it stronger, and also let you know if your password has been hacked or exposed in a data breach. So I implore you all to hop on the website and have a look at all those resources. So last slide. So thank you everyone for having me. I hope I was able to raise some awareness and provide you all with some practical steps. I want you all to remember that ID Support is here to help New South Wales. And don't forget to put any questions you have for me in the chat, and myself or my colleague Kate Bates will answer them. Thank you.
Thanks, Alicia. I was surprised to learn that as Australians, we're impacted by these scams at a greater rate than elsewhere in the world. But thank you for the practical tips, including just reviewing your bank statement regularly, which is a really simple thing for all of us to do. And I encourage everyone to use the learning modules and subscribe to the ID Support newsletter to keep getting those helpful tips. Our next speaker is Dr. Hannah Tonkin. Dr. Tonkin commenced her role as the inaugural New South Wales Women's Safety Commissioner in February last year. In this role, she provides leadership on whole of government policies and programs on domestic, family and sexual violence. Previously, Dr. Tonkin worked at the United Nations as Disability Rights Director and the Australian Human Rights Commission as a barrister in London and Adelaide. Dr. Tonkin will discuss coercive control laws, technology as a tool for control, and the promise of technology to address domestic family sexual violence. Over to you, Dr. Tonkin.
Thank you, Tanya, and hello, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here today. I'd first of all like to acknowledge that I'm joining this webinar from Gadigal land in Sydney, and I acknowledge that I'm on unceded Aboriginal land and I pay my respects to elders past and present, and also to any First Nations people joining the webinar today. I'd like to thank Tanya and also Women New South Wales more generally for organising this event and for convening such an expert panel. This is a critical issue, internet safety. We live in a world where we are all connected almost all the time. Connectivity is inescapable. From when we wake up to when we go to sleep, we're constantly connected to our devices. And in between, there are various gadgets that we use throughout the day that can be controlled through Google Home or Amazon Echo. This all exposes us to the risk of constant surveillance. And as the other panelists have already discussed, we're seeing new risks and new modes of surveillance every day. So it's hard to keep up. And this makes internet safety absolutely critical. And today's webinar really important. Now, I'd like to focus on the linkages between technology and domestic and family violence, and specifically technology and coercive control. So I'll first take you through an understanding of coercive control to build on what Carolyn said earlier, and particularly looking at the journey in New South Wales towards criminalising coercive control as a standalone offence. And then I'll talk about how technology can be a weapon of control in the context of domestic and family violence, but also how it can be a source of support for victim survivors. But before I delve into the topic, let me first tell you just a little bit about my role as the first New South Wales Women's Safety Commissioner and where I fit into all of this. So my role is the first of its kind in any Australian state or territory. I started exactly a year ago, actually, the 6th of February last year. And essentially, my role is to provide leadership and oversight across the whole government in New South Wales to promote a more coordinated approach, a more holistic approach to domestic, family and sexual violence. And I work very closely with the community sector and the private sector and across the whole community to promote those holistic responses. And a key priority for me as Commissioner is to amplify the voices of people with lived experience of domestic, family and sexual violence, to ensure that their perspectives and their expertise informs government policies and decision making. And I'm also trying to promote a much stronger focus on primary prevention and early intervention. So we're not always focusing on crisis response. And it was great to hear the work that Carolyn talked about, the eSafety Commission on prevention. That's such a crucial part of this discussion. So that tells you a bit about my role as Commissioner. Now I'd like to delve into the topic of coercive control and its linkages to technology. Now, Carolyn explained that coercive control is an umbrella term. It describes an ongoing pattern of controlling and coercive behaviour within a relationship, and that's over a period of time. And this pattern of coercion and control, it has the effect of denying the victim survivor their autonomy and their independence. It can be really pernicious. It can include a wide range of behaviours, both physical and non-physical. So it can include emotional abuse, psychological abuse, financial abuse, spiritual abuse, and also physical violence and sexual violence. And it's important to really emphasise that coercive control is not about single instances of abusive behaviour. It's actually about a pattern of behaviour over time. And it's this dynamic of coercion and control that really underpins domestic and family violence. Now, many of you will recall that in New South Wales, legislation was passed in November 2022 criminalising coercive control as a standalone offence. And that made New South Wales the first Australian state or territory to introduce a standalone offence of coercive control. In a nutshell, in terms of the definition, the new offence will apply when an adult engages in a course of conduct involving abusive behaviour against a current or former intimate partner. And they have to have the intention of controlling or coercing that person. So this idea of a course of conduct of abusive behaviour, that's really important because, as I said earlier, it captures this idea of coercive control being a pattern of behaviour over time rather than a particular incident, which is what a criminal offence is usually focused on. And the maximum penalty for the coercive control offence in New South Wales is 7 years imprisonment. Now, many of you would know that the enactment of this new legislation in New South Wales followed the introduction of coercive control offences in a number of jurisdictions overseas. So in particular, New South Wales looked at England and Wales, Scotland, Ireland and Northern Ireland, and looked at how they had criminalised coercive control. They'd all done it in slightly different ways, a number of different variables, but fairly comprehensive analysis was undertaken before the final version of the legislation was agreed to in New South Wales. Now, importantly, this new offence has not come into effect yet. It won't come into effect until the 1st of July this year. And that means there's a really long implementation period. The law was passed in November 2022. It will come into effect in July 2024. That's unusual, but it was deliberate. It was intended to allow time to implement training for all the key actors in the criminal justice system, so particularly police, judges, lawyers, prosecutors, and also training for workers in the sector, the domestic and family violence sector. And it was also intended to raise awareness and educate the public about coercive control, to have this long period of time when awareness campaigns could be conducted. And they're underway at the moment, including the training as well. There's a really strong focus on educating the community about coercive control and raising awareness. Now, one area where we certainly need to continue raising awareness is the role of technology as a tool for coercive control. This is absolutely crucial. We know that using technology as a means of abuse and control is extremely common, and Carolyn has set that out really clearly. Just last month, we saw one of the most influential musicians in the world, Taylor Swift. She fell victim to AI-generated sexually explicit fake images from social media. And those images attracted 27 million views in just 19 hours. And then the content was taken down. Now, luckily for Taylor Swift, her fans actually flooded the social media platform to drown out these deep fakes. Now, anyone can be a victim of this non-consensual sexual deep fakes, but women are particularly at risk, and it can be particularly common for women who are impacted by domestic and family violence. The intent behind this image-based sexual abuse is really to strip women of their dignity and their sexual autonomy. Now, more generally, talking about tech-facilitated abuse, it can enable an abuser to blackmail, intimidate, harass, and monitor the victim 24 hours a day. And that can make them feel constantly unsafe and constantly hypervigilant. And in the context of an intimate relationship, this can sometimes manifest as almost total power and control over an individual. And that can continue long after a relationship ends. It's quite common to have a relationship of coercion and control that ends, and then that actually continues that sort of behaviour, that tech-facilitated abuse. And in some cases, there may never have been a relationship at all. It's quite common to have stalking where there's not even an intimate relationship, but just one person develops some sort of obsession for another person, and that can be abused through tech-facilitated abuse as well. These scenarios are all too common. And as Carolyn explained, tech-facilitated abuse is also clearly gendered, just like domestic and family violence is. For example, there was an ANROS national survey of tech-facilitated abuse that found that many more women compared with men reported tech-facilitated abuse by a current or former partner. And more than 3/4 of female victim survivors said that their perpetrator was a man. So this is gendered. Both men and women can certainly experience tech-facilitated abuse, and both men and women can be abusers themselves. But the most common scenario is a man using tech-facilitated abuse against a woman. That's not by no means the only scenario, of course. Now, the good news is that technology can also be a powerful and positive tool for countering coercive control and empowering victim survivors and making sure they have support. There are many examples of digital technology helping victim survivors to connect with their loved ones or to connect with support services. We've seen digital innovation from the New South Wales Police They've developed an app called Empower You, which enables its users to document abuse discreetly and access support services. And that app's going to be important when the new coercive control offence comes into effect in July this year, as that will help to assist with the collection of evidence that could be used in a criminal trial. Now, I'm told by my police colleagues that since the app was launched in July last year, it has been downloaded by more than 7,500 users. And there are also exciting innovations in the private sector. I've become aware of an innovation by Nansen called the Chain FS pilot. Now, that innovative technology can offer solutions for safekeeping and accessing electronic documents. And that can be useful when these documents are most needed in times of crisis. For example, when women are experiencing abuse and they try to leave a relationship, particularly when it's tech-facilitated abuse. And Nansen's currently working with NGO partners in New South Wales to pilot the new technology. That's just one example of many innovations in this area. Now, these tech-based tools to assist victim survivors are very important, but we also need broader system improvements to address tech-facilitated abuse and to hold perpetrators accountable. We cannot put all the onus on victim survivors themselves. They're already under extreme duress. We can't expect them to bear all of the burden to take action to mitigate this tech-based abuse. So we need to look at broader systems that support victim survivors and looking at addressing the people who are actually perpetrating this abuse. We need to ensure that our key workforces are trained to recognise this abuse and to stop the people who are using technology to coerce and control. And of course, the risk of tech-facilitated abuse needs to be incorporated into risk assessments and safety planning that service organisations are doing. This is already happening in many cases. And I'd also reiterate what other speakers have said about the need for tech-based companies to implement a safety by design approach. This is crucial so that companies and organisations can better anticipate, detect and eliminate online risks and also just minimise the harms. And the work of the eSafety Commission has been really important in this area. And finally, we need to develop strong regulatory frameworks as well as policy frameworks so that we can address these risks and harms in a concrete and rigorous manner. So all of these measures taken together would go a really long way in creating a safer online environment for all of us. I'd like to end by reiterating the message of today: to connect, reflect, and protect. Let's make every day a safer internet day. So thank you to everyone who has joined us for this important discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tonkin. It will be very interesting to see if the deepfake with Taylor Swift actually creates any change, and if there is any strengthening of legislation around the use of AI. Very high profile example of what the future could unfortunately look like. Thank you very much. I'd like to introduce Kylie Flack. So Kylie joined Women New South Wales in 2019 after working on the establishment of the New South Wales Ageing and Disability Commission. It's a theme through our panellists have mostly worked in disability at some point in their career. Prior to this, Kylie worked in the disability services sector and held other local, state and Australian government roles. She's completed postgraduate studies in public policy, social research and Australian history. And Kylie's going to introduce us all to the Women's Financial Toolkit. Over to you, Kylie.
Thanks very much, Tanya. I'd like to reiterate Tanya's acknowledgement of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation as I am working on their country today. And I'd like to pay my respects to Elders past and present and any First Nations people joining us today. Next slide, please. Here at Women New South Wales, we strive to create a society where online or other technology-facilitated abuse is not tolerated. Part of this effort involves driving changes to unhelpful social gender norms that can influence undesirable and even illegal online behaviour, such as the gender disinformation that Caroline spoke of that normalises misogyny. We strive to create a society that I said that already. As we work towards this, we've developed resources, established programs and administered grants that promote the empowerment of women. And you can see those all on our website, which is also where the Women's Financial Toolkit is located. Next slide, please. A definite theme of what Women New South Wales is about is awareness and empowerment. Knowledge is power, as is knowing how to take action. The Women's Financial Toolkit is an example of this approach, and it's been around in various forms since 2019. We continue to add to it and promote it as a way to provide women with free, confidential access to trusted resources and information, mainly from government agencies and the not-for-profit sector. Women can search here for information that empowers them to be in control of their finances now and in the future. The Women's Financial Toolkit assumes all women have the right to be active participants in managing their financial well-being and opportunities. As Dr. Tonkin noted, we live in a connected world and there are risks that go with that. But there are also ways that we can use technology to help us. By highlighting what women can do, we hope to raise awareness about what may threaten financial well-being, including online scams and other threats. Next slide, please. The Women's Financial Toolkit has three main sections, which you can see on the slide. Everyday money matters, help with unexpected issues, and planning for the future. Each section connects you to a range of resources, including those tailored to people with different life experiences, such as people living with disability, carers, and young people. Today, in recognition of Safer Internet Day, I'll spend a little time pointing out the resources in the Help with Unexpected Issues section on the toolkit. Next slide, please. Under Help with Unexpected Issues, you'll see two hyperlinks to the next level of the toolkit. The first links you to support for disasters and emergencies, and the second links to support services for money concerns. Throughout the toolkit, all you need to do is click on the hyperlinks to move to the next level of information. Next slide, please. As you can see, there's now an accordion list of options. Under support services for money concerns, you will find 7 topics that cover a range of circumstances from debt to cybercrime. Next slide, please. If you select financial abuse, you will find various resources, services, and helplines. There are many options out there for people experiencing financial abuse, including those services that our previous speakers have told you about. If you need advice or need to know how to help someone else regarding financial and other forms of abuse, I encourage you to take a look. We only provide links to trusted services and information, so you can use the toolkit with confidence and confidentiality. Organisations offering financial counselling services to help with financial insecurity and hardship, including those arising from technology and the internet, can be found in the debt and financial hardship topic. And remember, it's never too early or too late to seek assistance. Next slide, please. Dr. Tonkin spoke about coercive control and domestic and family violence. As you can see, the toolkit links to the 1-800-RESPECT website. This website offers information on technology and safety, including tips for using their site. For example, using the quick exit button, incognito mode or private browsing so that what you've been looking at is deleted once your session is finished. They also recommend making a safety plan before making changes to your device or online account. You can call 1-800-RESPECT on 1-800-737-732, or you can chat online with them via their website or via their text chat function, and they can help you with those aspects of cybersecurity. Next slide, please. 2 other key subsections are the technology facilitated abuse section and the avoiding scams section. Under these, the Women's Financial Toolkit links to a number of sites that provide information on scams and cybercrime, some of which you've already heard about today. You can also see that big purple box with the arrow. There's an interesting talk there from Julia Weber, a former ambassador of the toolkit. I encourage you all to take a look. She has some powerful information to share and tips on how to protect yourself online. Her tips on passwords are particularly useful, so I encourage you to take the time to listen. It'll supplement what you've heard today from Alicia. She showed you there are good reasons to protect your personal information and how you can do so. We certainly all want to stay off that dark web marketplace, and it's great to know that Alicia's team is there to help, and I'll definitely be testing my passwords out. Next slide, please. To give another example of the scams and cybercrime resources on the toolkit, this is the link to the New South Wales Office of Fair Trading, where there is excellent information on scams and cybercrime, including where to report the different types of incidents that may take place. I'd also encourage you to sign up to ScamWatch that Carolyn talked about so that you can get their news and alerts. And in another Taylor Swift connection, today, ScamWatch is warning Taylor Swift fans to look out for scammers offering fake tickets to her Eras tour. Apparently, fake tickets are being advertised for sale on social media through hacked accounts. And I just thought I'd give you a tip from ScamWatch. They have 3 points that they like people to remember. The first is stop. Don't give your money or personal information out if you're unsure about it. Think, ask yourself if the message that you're looking at could be fake, and protect. Act quickly if something feels wrong. Next slide, please. Hopefully that gives you a sense of the Women's Financial Toolkit and what we're hoping to achieve by maintaining this resource on our website. The challenges associated with online safety are difficult and sensitive, as we've heard, but by working across government and across the community, we're confident that we can improve online safety and women will be empowered to find the services and other opportunities that meet their needs. Feel free to reach out to Women New South Wales if you have any questions or if you'd like to know more. Thank you.
Thanks, Kylie, for walking us through that tool. And when we send out the resources, there will be a link to that for everyone to have a look at. So now we'll move on to the Q&A part of the webinar. So we had a question in the chat. Alicia, this one's for you. Does locking your Facebook profile help with security?
Yes, it does. So it's not available to everybody yet, but it should be coming available to everyone soon. So if you do have it, locking your profile means that there's a limited view of the profile content to people that are not your friends on Facebook. So when someone locks their profile, only their friends are going to see photos, stories, new posts and photos, also any posts that they've shared in the past. So all of these things, if you are able to lock your profile, same thing as making it private, but it also means that people can't see past shared content if they're not your friends.
Thanks so much, Alicia. And thank you, Carolyn, for posting that link. Dr. Tonkin, a question for you. Have the new coercive control, the new legislation, has it broadly been well received?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I'd say broadly, yes. There are still, people are still waiting to see how it's implemented, of course. So that's going to be the real test. There was a lot of consultation in the lead up to the legislation being passed in 2022, and so there were some disagreements then as to whether criminalisation was a good move or what the precise form that the legislation should take. So that was all discussed extensively, and there were some concerns raised about criminalisation and some people who are not in favour of criminalisation and others who are. So there was a long discussion of that over the previous years, and ultimately the legislation that was passed was actually narrowed down in that drafting process. So it started a bit broader, and then the final version of the legislation that was passed was slightly narrower in order to address some of the concerns that were raised during that process. And so now we have to see how the legislation will be implemented, and there'll be a monitoring process to assess various aspects of the legislation. And there's actually a statutory review. This is really important. 2 years after the laws come into effect, there's a statutory review, and that will consider a number of different aspects of how the laws are working, and that's a formal process. So there's quite a rigorous process that will be undertaken to see how the laws are operating in the coming years.
Excellent. And that statutory review will take into account, I suppose, the community's feedback on how that legislation's been implemented and the effect it's had.
That's right. And it will also take into account a number of formal monitoring mechanisms that are being put in place. So looking at quantitative monitoring, but also looking at some more qualitative monitoring and involving all the relevant government agencies, as well as the domestic and family violence sector. So it will be quite a rigorous, comprehensive process.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Tonkin. A question for Caroline. How can I help someone who's reluctant to seek help for tech-based abuse?
Yeah, thank you. I think it will partly depend on why they're reluctant. But one of the things I know that we talk about in our training for frontline workers, and it's a strong message in the sector, is reporting can sometimes make things more unsafe, at least temporarily, for people that are experiencing domestic and family violence. So it needs to be done carefully if that is the situation. It'd possibly be about finding a local domestic and family or sexual violence support service that can help that person understand or go through the risks, to do a risk assessment around reporting. Possibly it's about, if it's not that context, but just not understanding the consequences. So when abuse that meets our complaint scheme criteria is reported and acted on, sometimes even if it doesn't meet a criteria under the adult cyber abuse scheme, our investigators can still get action happening. They have developed over the years good relationships generally with the major tech companies, and so some of those things can be done informally rather than relying on the legislation, and content can be removed. And content can be removed, but also action can be taken against individuals to stop them from doing it again, because we've had instances where women have reported tech-based abuse. They've been able to, eSafety's been able to work with the relevant companies to get that content removed, but the perpetrator threatens to do it again, and action can be taken to, with that perpetrator, to make it difficult for them to do it without severe consequences. So the other thing, it can be, reports can be made on behalf of someone else if they're not prepared to do it themselves or don't want to talk through it. They can have a trusted other person who can make that report. They just need to convey to eSafety's investigators that it's been done on behalf of someone else, that can go through. Look, I hope that helps answer the question. But
yeah, and I mean, it goes back to those sort of gender norms and the shame around that it's something shameful about having, shared, with your consent, a nude image, and that like the actions of the person to post that publicly is where the shame should lie.
yes.
And so, sort of getting that message out that there's nothing shameful in saying that I had shared this image, and now that it's somebody's done the wrong thing and illegally, without my consent, posted that online.
Yes.
But it's great to hear that there is something that can do, and I think that message needs to get out. I think people are sort of the opinion, once it's online, that's it. There's just no sort of recourse, which is where we were, I suppose, a few years ago. But it's great that that's available. Got another couple of questions. Dr. Tonkin, I might pose this one to you. Why are women at higher risk of tech-based abuse?
Yeah, that's a good question. We know in general that domestic and family violence and sexual violence, that they affect women disproportionately. So we know from various statistics, but for example, the Australian Bureau of Statistics Personal Safety Survey, we know that women are much more likely to experience violence or abuse by someone they know rather than a stranger, much more likely than men. They're much more likely than men to experience violence or abuse in their own home. So men are more likely to experience that sort of public stranger abuse. So I think this is really a carryover from that gendered nature of domestic and family violence and sexual violence. It's that very personal nature of this abuse and the tech facilitated abuse is gendered in the same way that domestic and family violence, as we would more traditionally understand it, is gendered. And that's been clear for many, many years, that gendered nature.
Thank you. That's a really good explanation. I think we've got one question. I'm not sure if this one is best for either Alicia or Carolyn. So what strategies are in place for telcos to do more monitoring of scam emails and SMS?
Now, I know they are doing a lot around monitoring and trying to stop scam calls and texts coming through. I think it was over 330 million scam texts have been blocked since July 2022. However, they're never going to be able to stop them all. As soon as they stop one, another one's going to come in its place. So I know the Australian Communications and Media Authority, they do a lot of work in monitoring, what's coming through, working on new programs to try and stop it. But it's learning. Every day, every week, every month, it's more learning, more information that's coming in, more reports coming in, is really how they're trying to monitor, track, and stop this coming through.
Thank you. Carolyn, do you have anything to add there?
Look, I'd reinforce what Alicia said, that there's been quite a bit of action in this space. I mean, and different sectors as well. So the financial sector's been quite good at recognising their role in detecting sort of abusive messages that are coming in through micro financial transactions, and they're catching a lot of those things. And I'd also give a plug. We work regularly with the Telco Together Foundation, and they have been proactive in the way that they handle domestic violence, reports of domestic violence coming in, the way they handle that. So they're doing some work, and also the I think it's Communications Alliance. So there is some work happening out there, and also, yeah, the ACMA is proactive in this space.
Thank you. I think they're all the questions we've got in the chat. But I'd like to take the time to thank all of our speakers for generously sharing their time and expertise with us. We've had many resources shared with us that are available to help us navigate a safer internet. And I think Olivia's putting up a slide now with some of those resources. Excellent. So, yeah, we encourage you to have a look at those. We also welcome any questions out of session. So if you think of anything, you can pop it off to us and we'll try and find the right person to answer your question. And shortly, we'll send a quick evaluation by email, and we'd be grateful if you could complete this just to ensure that our webinars are meeting your needs. We really value your feedback for improving the work that we do at Women New South Wales. So in addition to our wonderful speakers, I'd like to thank everybody who joined us here to participate today. Appreciate you taking the time to join with us today. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.